Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce my book, which is the same title as this podcast. It's called A Gift from Adversity, and the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. I was born and raised in Japan, and I experienced all of this growing up. After I published my book, which is available on Amazon, I got a lot of messages from different places. Mainly, people are sharing their adversities. This year, 2022, after I published my book in 2020, I felt compelled to create a platform where people can talk about adversity, but not only that, tools that they use to overcome and a gift that came from it. And it's been nothing but powerful, empowering, inspiring experience for me. And I appreciate all of the guests so far that came tonight. We are very excited to have Sonny Tran for our episode 75. Hi, Sonny. Thank you so much for coming to A Gift from Adversity.
It's awesome. Well, thank you for having me. And I'm glad to be 75. That's a good number.
Yes, absolutely. So, Sonny, can you tell our audience who you are and then what you do and where are you coming in from today?
Well, my name is Sonny Tran. I came from Vietnam, but I'm in Philadelphia. I've been in this country over 40 years. Um, who I am is I actually have helped entrepreneurs make money in their businesses for over 20 years. I own a bank, I own an insurance company, did all this, financial stuff. But I find out that most people's problems are actually in their mind and themselves.
Do you have any social media website that you can share with our audience?
Sure. Yeah. I have a YouTube channel building. It's you can find it. The handle I just got was like Sonny Finds the Money. Website sonnyfindsthemoney.com. Instagram's the same, Sonny Finds the Money. And yeah, that's some of my websites, and it's Sonny Tran under Facebook.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, Sonny, let's dive into our first question, which is the adversity. So, can you share our audience what was your adversity?
Well, the adversity that we had was, I guess, is the best as a start in the beginning, which my grandmother, she died at the age of 43 years old. And on her deathbed, she was yearning and saying, she tam tit, which in Vietnamese means that she wanted to eat meat or taste it even. She actually never got to eat meat her whole life. At 43 years, she died, and we couldn't get it to her with my mom because we didn't have money. Being poor was really the crime in Vietnam, in a third world country. And in my country, a lot of people, they say you die for Chung Yaw. So Chung Yaw in Vietnamese translated to English is you die from a cold. Well, the truth is you don't die from a cold. There's no money or anything. Doctors have to be paid to do things. And that's kind of what happened. And she had 10 children. And we're farmers, so we only could eat what you could plant, and that was kind of her whole life. And it burned a hole in my mother's soul. She vowed never to happen, and we escaped Vietnam. From Vietnam, we went to, it was after the war, to what is it, there's the Philippines. We skipped that to Indonesia. And with that trip, it's kind of a long way. It was 775 nautical miles. We traveled 5 knots. We spent 5 days at sea, and it was 1,096 miles from Vietnam, from the port of Vũng Tàu. And the reason we left is because when you lose the war, you know how all the Americans, they pulled out of Vietnam, all the communists, they come down and they killed a lot of males because really that was a civil war that a lot of people didn't like. And when they do that, they kill the males. And my mom didn't want me to serve in the army. So we were, at sea, brought basically only the clothes that we had on our back. We were fortunate enough that my uncle wanted to, like, it was a cousin uncle, save us. Family is really important to us back then. And, we did that trip, spent 6 months in Malaysia, and finally got to the land of opportunity of America, where even then we lived, what, 8 people? Yeah, 8 people, 9 people actually, because there was another uncle that came in a 1-bedroom apartment. And we lived in those projects for quite some time. And we're fortunate enough to, have other people help us that could speak the language Vietnamese and English. Because actually I was born Lu. We came to this country because I'm the son of my parents. So my name became Son. And Americans, it's easier for them to translate that into Sonny because like son, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was definitely what we faced was poverty. And like, how do you like do and have a better life and all that? And a lot of that has been with other people helping, people that spoke both English and Vietnamese. And I see that today, if you can speak more than one language, it's actually a responsibility to help others.
Sonny, so in these 5 minutes or so that you shared with us is like a movie. It's crazy that how you eloquently told us in such a short period of time of someone's life, and being on a boat going after the war to a different country, to different countries, and then finally came to America. So how old were you? Do you remember being on a boat?
I was 18 months old. I don't remember, but I actually had stories my mom was like telling me, and I looked up a lot of like the history back then. There was like pirates, robberies, plunder, sex trafficking, rape. It was really dangerous. United Nations High Commission estimated 200, 400,000 people died at sea from drowning, prior to dehydration. They didn't have enough water. Many boats never made landfall. The one that we were on only had 69 people on it. And I can tell you that what's kind of like really interesting about that is that same age, my son, when he was 18 years old, my mom never stepped on a boat again. So I was able to, at the same time, when my son was 18 months old, we were on a luxury cruise. First time ever I was on a cruise. My son and my mom's first time ever on a boat since, having that boat leaving Vietnam. Was like, things can change in a generation. And that's why I think that it's important to go after like your dreams and everything. So my mom was a strong lady. That adversity is like, she was kind of like single mom. She actually was in an arranged marriage too, Juri. So that was another thing too. Once grandma died, we're poor. And my grandfather was like, you need to get married, and married her to like a little upper middle class family. So my parents actually hate each other. Not like they like each other. It's a really dysfunctional, I guess, kind of relationship thing. And honestly, I vowed never to do that, but I'm in a relationship that's kind of like that too. It's very rough. It's like my mom, and she's the most negative person I ever met. And you know how Asian families are. You ever hear tiger mom and all that? Well, yeah, that was like the family and things like that too. So, yeah, there's a lot there too, but she had to be strong. She was the oldest of 10 children. She had to cook and do everything for the other children. And when, lost her mom, she was in her 20s. So the rest of the family had to eat still, and it was mom to cook because dad was, her dad was in the military. And you know how a lot of people have PTSD and everything from that. He wasn't a very kind or nice man at all. He was very violent and all that. My mom wanted to be a nun. I guess that didn't work out, once, grandma lost. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of normal actually in the country there when you don't have decisions, you don't get to make decisions. People make decisions for you and you just have to survive, you know?
So when she finally came to America, did she fly from somewhere?
That part of the story, I don't like. I never really asked on that one. I know that we spent 6 months in Indonesia, and I believe that you had to fly from that part. I will get more of that sort. That's a good question. Sure, you even asked questions I didn't. I was like, man, that's kind of like rough. And I was like, man, because I always hear the things of she doesn't want to get married and all this stuff, and how she hates my father and all this stuff. But it was more like they're still together now. I thought like after like the kids grown up that she would move to Vietnam and stayed there, but they're still together, fighting every day. She's
Wow.
dominant in the relationship. So my father became weaker, and I can see those personality traits like transfer to me. How I just, let my wife or fiance win all the time in arguments and things like that. So yeah, 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 it was that we were sponsored by my grandmom's sister, my grandfather's sister, here, and we came here to build a life, and we couldn't survive. We first moved to Ohio, and there was no jobs or anything. Then we moved to Atlantic City because back then, I know some people watch Boardwalk Empire. The casinos are big. Oh, anyone can get a job at the casinos, right? So that was the next step, and we moved into a ghetto in Atlantic City. So that was kind of how we did things.
So, how was your English growing up?
I spoke no English. My family spoke no English. I was actually, they thought I was like really slow or retarded. We went to Catholic school, thank God, you know what I mean? But because my mom did have money to do that for religion, because faith is really important to us. And I think that's important to everyone, no matter what religion you are. But with that is like, I didn't speak English kindergarten and first grade. I remember I gave this girl a Valentine's card, wrote on construction paper. I had no idea what to say. I kind of knew it was kind of Valentine's, but I couldn't because I was speaking Vietnamese. No one knew what the freak I was saying. I said nobody, or first grade. But in second grade, I learned English, and I started like doing things, and I got transferred to another school at that time. I do remember kindergarten, first grade. I just really didn't remember being able to communicate with people, but just saying stuff in Vietnamese, and they're just like, they had no idea. But I do remember that we had no money. And in first grade, a nun, gave me a quarter. I don't know how she had to, like, so I can eat a bag of potato chips. And I was so grateful for that bag of potato chips. I didn't know what that was. I do remember that. And I was like, wow. And now I look back and I think back and I was like, man, you know, this is a great country, and people really want to support and help people. And that's the only way that people can get by and survive. Other people loving you.
Wow. So, after the second grade, that you start to speak English,
Mm-hmm.
and did you experience any discrimination or bullying growing up?
Oh yeah, a lot of that. I was little, obviously we're starving our whole lives and everything. So I was really little compared to everybody else. And, we lived in a bad neighborhood, the projects. I would say probably like 80% of it was African American. We're not African and we're not white. So that's really it. You know what I mean? We're like other. So we got grouped in as Asians with like so that was like interesting. And that was that way up through high school. So yeah, there was a lot of that. We got robbed a lot. My dad, I still remember, like maybe third or fourth grade or something. He went to get some fried chicken, and he had like $10 and think, oh, I almost forgot. I need to bring this up. This was like probably one of my oldest memories was when I was probably like 3 years old. And this is still something that like I still need to get over. And I was working with Tony Robbins and these other people to get through, is that I really wanted a change bag, because that was in the 80s, early 80s, is that women used to carry money in a little coin bag purse that you put coins in, right? And I wanted to hold it. I was sitting in a shopping cart. So that was one of my strongest memories. And I wanted to hold the bag of change. My mom was like, okay, cool. I can hold, because I kept on crying. I remember in a shopping cart, she gave it to me. I remember the jacket I wore. It's like a flannel jacket. And I held it. Then a tall man, we live in Prague, snatched that pocketbook, change bag thing. And I don't know how much money was in it. It was probably like maybe $10 or something, but that was groceries for the week. And I got what I wanted from mom because she loved me, and I was crying a lot and all that other stuff. But once you lost that, we didn't have groceries. We walked home. I remember the feeling of like so disappointed how mad my mom was, or sad. And I never really dared even ask even today, like, what happened? I know that was for groceries, and I don't know. We didn't have money for groceries then. And it's because I got what I wanted. And because of me getting what I wanted, like, we didn't eat, you know? I don't really know what happened. I still don't even know. But that is one of my those memories, and it's held me back to like me not respecting myself and not like deserving. Like I would do more for others, and Tony teaches that too, than I would do for myself. And I never want to do anything for myself. I always feel like I need to be a martyr, and maybe that feeling or emotion is like caught up or stuck, and it's like I don't want to have anything for myself. I always want to do for others, and I'm still even like I'm 43 now, trying to fight that. Be like I do deserve things, and I do deserve like to be loved and all these other things. But yeah, that happened too. Discrimination, and I played football back then. In high school, I was actually the second fastest person in the whole team. So yeah, I guess football. I was like 115 pounds on the football team too. So I was little still, but I was really fast. Um, yeah, I got beat up from my own team. So a lot of times when we were in a pile, because people are like really angry because I'm not supposed to be the fastest, I suppose, and things like that. And I was the only Asian person on the football team too. um, yeah, it was rough. It's like, Atlantic City, they like back then was a crime zone. Like my first day in high school, because we went from Catholic school to public school. There's 3 fights in this school. There was like race wars between African Americans and white people, and there was Hispanic wars and things. And my first day of high school, like one person got their skull bashing like 3 inches, hit with a trash can or something. I don't really have. And someone else got their eye stabbed with like a pen. And I was like, man, this is really rough public school. I had no idea what they didn't expect. That's public school. I was like, and the cops came in with riot gear and they tear gassed the high school. So you can probably look at history. Atlantic City High School was really bad back then. So that's kind of how it is when you don't have money, I guess, But yeah, I grew up where people rob each other, jump each other is normal. They do something called run your pockets, like they'll pat your pockets down. You have money. Good thing we didn't have money because we're broke. That's kind of how it was. But you still get beat up anyway because you still have to make an example, I suppose, out of people. But yeah, that was my high school too. And I got sent away to Colorado to college. See, some of these things you're making remind. I've forgotten all about that. I was shipped to Colorado because I was into like, man, we got to do something, have a better life. And the reason I was shipped out, my parents saw me, like, I was like, man, I was like, I need to make money. And I had like these science experiments, like this triple beam balance. It was a scale. And, the big thing in Atlantic City was like selling drugs and marijuana and stuff like that. And, I was like, man, you can buy a whole pound of weed for like $400 and you can sell a lot of little dime bags. I was like, man, that's a good business. Because I was already an entrepreneur back then. My parents caught wind of me having like a scale. Like, what is that for? And I was like, oh, it's a science experiment. My uncle knew better, obviously, since he knows more English. And he sent me away. I was really angry. It was my senior year too. I was a junior in high school, and the girl that I was dating, she became like prom queen. And I was like, man, I was really angry then. I didn't get to do that either. But yeah, I guess there was, how not having money and things created a different mindset. Wow, you brought that out of me. I didn't think that was like not my plan of talking about any of that stuff at all. Interesting.
So you kind of mentioned a little bit about fried chicken. Your dad got robbed when he was trying to get a fried chicken too.
Yeah, KFC. It was Kentucky Fried Chicken. It was literally only like 3 blocks from our house.
What
He got
happened?
jumped. He just got jumped and beat up, and it took his $10 or something. He only had $10. It's not like a lot of money. And he came home, and I was like, there was not many. I was like a little kid at the time. I don't know what grade. I think it might have been like 2nd or 3rd grade even. I don't like. All I remember is like, hey, you have to get chicken because we call it Vietnamese like gajien. So I think at that time I probably didn't even speak English. So it might have been really right at between 1st grade and 2nd grade. I don't really remember. I just remember that was what happened. And later I asked, like, you know what I mean? I remember how traumatic it was. He had to kind of go to the hospital and things like that. He came together because my mom and dad actually worked together when we made that voyage to Vietnam. Like they were separated. He actually got to go to America because his family had money, and my mom was stuck in Vietnam. And it was my uncle. He's like, what? You're still here? And she was pregnant with me. And I guess my dad didn't even know I was born. So that was like a whole nother mess in itself. Yeah. My thoughts aren't really collected. It's interesting. Yeah.
So what happened when you went to Colorado?
I was angry. I was angry. It was my senior year. I went to junior prom, was awesome. I was on the track team, I was on the football team, I was on the crew team. I became popular. You know what I mean? I did all these things. I was like, and I was angry. I was really angry, and I mean, I was kind of recluse. And Columbine happened actually later. That was one my freshman year in college. Yeah, but at that time, I think some lady, African American lady, because I think in Colorado there was a little bit of racism. Not a little bit. There's a lot of racism. There's something new that I never discovered before. There was like neo-Nazi type people and skinheads. They didn't really exist out east in New York State, but they were out there. You know what I mean? So there's some lady, I think African lady, bus, and they said they were gonna hang her or something. It was crazy back then. And but yeah, but there's also something. There was like an Asian task force in Colorado too. So I guess Asian people were strong in a way. It was weird. I was like, what? And like, because I guess they were stealing cars and stuff like that. And there was a task force just for Asian people. I went to some karaoke place, when I was like 18. So I was in high school. No, that was after high school, but in high school I was angry. So let's go backwards. I'm like jumping timelines now. This is like all emotional now. But yeah, in high school, I was angry. I went to like mainly a white school, like it was white and Hispanic, but mainly a white kind of because my uncle was rich. Isn't that cool? I got to hang out with rich uncle. He drove me to school in a Mercedes Benz. I was like, we drove a Chevy Caprice, which was like a cop car converted and whatever, and you buy it like really cheap at I guess an impound or something. But yeah, it was really interesting. It was different. I learned how people money think is different. It's totally different than the environment that I grew up in. There wasn't violence or anything like that, but I was still like violent back then. I think Tupac and there's a war of Biggie Smalls, East Coast, West Coast. Like you're from the East Coast, and that's the farthest west I've been was Colorado. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh no, I got to be tough. I don't know what's going on out here. These people, you know what I mean? And yeah, I was just really angry. And, I met other Vietnamese people. They're like, yeah, we should hang out. We're like sat little Asian things, like their family of like four that went to high school and me, and then knew another Vietnamese. So we had like 5 or 6 people. That's it. And everyone else was like American, white, and Hispanic because there's a lot of, Mexicans were in the area that I lived in too. But yeah, it was okay. I just felt recluse and I didn't know anyone. And senior year in high school was kind of tough. And usually built up all these associations that I did, back in Atlantic City. So it's like starting over. I didn't play sports. I thought about it, but I didn't want to do any of that. I just slept all the time and all that. And I guess I had a little bit of depression or whatever, but I was like hanging out with some other like family that was kind of like not so thing, like distant family. And they like, kind of like stole cars and stuff. I was like, man, these West Coast people are like stealing stuff and things. That's definitely different. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there's that. And college was Columbine. So there's a lot of violence in Colorado where I went. That's when that happened. That happened like about a few, like not even a mile from the college I went to. So I did do National Honor Society and all that. I got my stuff together and I thought more. And I was like, my mom was poor her whole life. I was still poor, but I need to change my destiny. So I started studying more and things like that. And I focused, and everything I did was because we didn't have money. I went to school for free. It was on a scholastic achievement. My mom didn't have to pay for it. She bought me my first car. She felt bad and she moved with me. She followed me, So that was something that's really interesting too. She moved and brought her whole family to Colorado and they bought a liquor store. Isn't that funny? Um, so she was my entrepreneur role model, and my uncle, of course. He owned shopping centers. Yeah, I don't know.
Wow, but thank you so much for sharing that. Sonny, a lot of times I'm Asian myself, and people just don't understand that the discrimination exists towards Asians. And then I think it's kind of brought up after the pandemic or during the pandemic that Asian people um, kind of got really targeted. But then, you know, it's not the pandemic. It just sometimes socioeconomic background and the discrimination really comes from like maybe the inferiority complex, maybe that when you are in Atlantic City, luckily you had a sports and then you are a track star, football star, and then that aspect might have helped you. But a lot of times that if you can't find a niche when you're growing up and as an immigrant and then as somebody who didn't really speak English and not obviously looking like American, it's
Mm.
so easy to be targeted. And then to navigate through on top of that, um, being financially disadvantaged, um, coming from different country and then different economical background, I think that is really, really hard. And then you said it in very fast paced and then very eloquent way, but the impact that you had experienced, I'm sure that there are so much hidden emotions and anger. You said you were angry when you were shipped to Colorado, and then I'm sure that there are so many things that maybe you didn't even recognize, that maybe you had a PTSD or depression growing up and anxiety, which we are talking more. But how do you describe growing up now, thinking back, your emotional stage, mental health stage? Like, how do you rate that? How do you measure that if you think back your
Well,
childhood, your teens?
I did have a lot of what do you call it when you can't sleep? Insomnia. I had major insomnia, so I didn't sleep much, and I think I was like, "What's the purpose of life?" You know. So those are kind of thought about. I was like, I don't know what the purpose is. Like money wasn't like a thing or things like that. And I think you're right. You know, when you're speaking about like Asians, like it's our culture that we're quiet and things happen. We just toughen up and just like get over it, you know? And like you're right. Like there are sports that kind of got into it, but I had a lot of friends that are gang members too. So I had some protection, you know, like in Hispanic environment, especially. And since I did some football, like I not even like football and sports in high school, but also we played a lot on the playground with other people. Some of these people I played football were in jail and they went to jail and they came out. So other people were afraid of them. Okay. So yes, it's good to have some friends that are like, you know, like that. But at the same time, it was still a different kind of culture, you know, because we weren't like fitting in, like you were saying, Asian. We're not white, we're not black, we're not Hispanic. We're just other. Like back then, you know, in the 80s, this is you're just classified as other. Like Asian people aren't all around, and especially where I live. I mean, in other places, I guess when I moved to Denver later in my life, they were recognized because I guess a lot of them came from California and they're like stealing cars and stuff like that. So they had a task force just for them. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like interesting seeing different parts of the country. And I would have never known if my parents never sent me out. And it's all out of love, you know, all that. But yeah, I had a lot of bottled up and pen and feeling like, you know, I had a long distance relationship with a girlfriend and I talked to her for like 12 hours or 10 from a phone booth. So that was crazy. I forgot all about that too. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, I did that because, you know, I guess I couldn't connect with people around me or, you know, I didn't feel like the pain or whatever. So I met back then, you know, you had AOL and it was dial up. You had to pay $3 an hour. I met an AOL, had an AOL girlfriend, which, you know, I guess was my first love too. So I really think about it. I was like, yeah, you know, yeah, that was great. I brought a chair to a phone booth to do that. So because I got in trouble using the AOL dial up, like the bill was a lot. My uncle was like, what's that? And back then I think it was Prodigy that you use for internet and AOL, you know? So yeah, there's a lot of different emotions here. And I mean, like, I didn't even think we were going to talk about any of this at all. So you're really good at pulling these things out. And yeah, thank you.
Well, well, thank you so much for sharing it. And Sonny, I just want to highlight the Vietnamese people went through obviously the whole country, the war, and
Yeah.
the trauma that created the poverty and the disadvantage from so many aspects. Just to let you know, my grandmother is a survivor of World War II,
Oh,
and I can relate to your grandmother that she was telling me, for instance, when she got diagnosed with cancer. This is when I came to America after I graduated, and then and when I came back to America, why you came back? And she's like, yeah, cancer is nothing compared to surviving World War II.
mm,
I have home, I have family. Back then, she was orphan, and then she had no parents. she was raising the kids around her. And she said she didn't even have a detergent sometimes, so she had to burn something and then use ashes to wash something.
Mm,
Very poor. And also, she survived a big earthquake that happened in Japan as well. So, level of poverty and hunger that people just don't understand that come from war.
mhm.
And whatever the reason that adults and the politicians are doing, the significant effect comes to vulnerable populations such as women and children. And
Yeah,
your grandmother was absolute victim of that. In the last word she said in 40s when she died that she wanted meat, she wanted to taste meat. That's
yeah,
like the saddest thing. And I remember yeah, my grandma really sacrificed, and then after, she married to my grandpa, but she became widow at like maybe 50s. A year before I was born, my grandpa died by car accident. So
wow,
she really
sorry.
raised two kids on her own, and she didn't have like life for herself until she was in her 60s. So I can kind of see, imagine it's a different war, obviously, and the chemical was used in Vietnamese um,
Mhm.
countries, the Vietnamese, and then atomic bomb was used in Japan. Um, so it's just we, obviously, our generation didn't directly experience that, but the struggle that you went through, the fact that you have to leave your own country, that your mom felt desperate to go somewhere else, otherwise maybe she wouldn't have survived. That is really messed up, and that's a direct effect from the war. And
Yeah.
in direct, it's called intergenerational trauma that you took on, however you didn't experience the war. So how would you describe those kind of war background affecting you in your life? Have you thought about that?
Well, I have. I think yes, it did create like the extreme poverty and everything. But you know what it did also create? It gave the opportunity. And I know that a lot of times, like for success and things to happen, some of the mentors and things that I have, I've been very fortunate to work with very successful people, is that on the other side of pain, and when you can solve that pain, then that's where you triumph and struggle. Yeah, we were tremendously poor, but we were even poor in the United States. Like you said with your grandma, is a cakewalk compared to before. You know what I mean? Like the war, during the war, or like us in Vietnam. Like literally, my grandmother died because we didn't have money to have a doctor like save her life. That's really what happened. You don't die from a cold. Who dies from a cold? No, you don't die because you don't have the money to treat it, and it becomes probably pneumonia and a bunch of other things. So I think that's the reality of it. But because of that sacrifice, and we had strong women in our lineage and your lineage as well, that's why we're here today. And we're in a land of opportunity at the greatest time ever. And that's what we have to kind of look at it, not at the negative part of it, because of their sacrifice, because of their struggle, because of their adversity, is why we have our lives today that's cushy compared to anything that they experience. And even now, people are complaining about that. And right now, we have a war that's going on that's displacing. Fathers are being killed in war. Wives and children are like out somewhere, and people are kidnapping them, doing all kinds of stuff. These days, today, with this stuff, there's people that are like killing people, taking their organs. That stuff didn't really exist back then. You know what I mean? So it's getting like the world's getting to be like a scary place, but there needs to be someone that stands up for them. And that's the people that have been through. Like, see, yeah, it's intergenerational trauma. We're feeling it, but we still feel those effects and we see it. But I think also that gives us the opportunity, since we can feel it, you understand my pain, I understand your pain, and we understand others, that maybe we can do something about it. I think that's where this is giving us more strength and power to recognize where our ancestors went through and family members. And how can we go about it? Is by looking at it from a positive kind of light. We're here because we felt that, and we can change things because you have a voice, you have this show, you have podcast, you writing books. You know what I mean? I've done the same. These things can spread more message to people so they can be more cognizant and conscious of the things that are happening around them since they didn't experience it. They can take it from us firsthand of our experiences.
Absolutely. So we're gonna save that for the tools part a little bit, but I just really want to appreciate you because I never had a guest coming from Vietnamese, and then I never had a guest who went through the starting from the boat experience
Yeah.
and then coming to a different country, and it's just so like unimaginable pain, unimaginable um mental health issues and anxiety, and then you mentioned about insomnia. I'm sure a lot more happened, but we just did not have the language back then. We just never had this kind of conversation in 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you describe in Vietnamese culture or community, like say for instance, going to see a counselor growing up, like in Japan, for instance, Sonny, that when I was growing up, so, like I said, I was child sexually abused or physically abused and escaped from my dad when I was 13. And I tried to kill myself when my mom didn't believe me.
Oh.
So that's kind of a short story. But then I was in Japan back then that if I said to somebody that I went to see a psychologist or counselor or on a medication, I would be like targeted and I would hide it. Even at the companies, for instance, it's getting better, I think. But then back then, if you say I'm seeing a counselor or something, that you'll be totally discriminated. So this is the second and third shock waves. Then initial um unfortunate like adversity that happened to you. How is it in the Vietnamese community, like say, in America growing up, if you were to seek for help like that? Do you remember?
Um, there really isn't anything like that. I mean, like, first of all, you don't even have people to speak the language. That's one problem. You know what I mean? And the people who did speak the language were poor too. We're all just trying to survive in our little, like community. We were refugees from the war. So I don't really think there was like any kind of counseling. All we had was like social services. And since we were Catholic, then we had Catholic social services that would help us, a little bit more, get an extra stick of butter or something like that. So that was, and some milk, but that was it. I mean, like whatever, like you have mental issues and stuff, you kind of just have to deal with it. And I guess it's more different today because there's many more people that speak the language. But back then there really wasn't. Like you barely had people that could speak English than to do anything else. That was like fresh right when the war ended. Like people came here from Vietnam and they just know a little bit more than you. That's it. It's not like, oh yeah, they can understand that. So you don't have PhDs and professors and stuff from Vietnam. None of that. So I don't, there's no counseling or anything like that. So I don't really like know exactly like how that. I think you just have to kind of figure it out. I guess when you talk about how the United States is now, I guess it's more like, all right, if you're in kindergarten, then I guess I'm in first grade, so I can help you out a little bit in kindergarten. So that's the only kind of context that I can place on people that are dealing with that type of stuff. And in the Asian or Vietnamese culture, is like when you're being battered, you just get the whip, and that's it. And back then, yeah, you have a chopstick, and you break the chopstick, they hit you more and hit you more. So I think I know violence culture is different today than it used to be. Not just American and Vietnamese society of America, but it was violence. Like you would get beat, like, and that was it. And women are more timid and introspective, I guess. And men, you'd be dominant. They would be the ones hitting people and things like that. So I got hit a lot, but I would absorb a lot of the stuff from my three sisters because I was like the eldest. And my three sisters were all born here in this country, and yeah, I kind of had the brunt of everything. I actually, now remembering more of it, I kind of ran away when I was I was in third grade. Yeah, I was in third or fourth grade, in between those two grades. And I wrote a note to my teacher at the time, hey, I'm not coming back, whatever. From the violence, I guess, at home, my dad beating me. My uncle hit me too. So it's kind of like a couple of those. But he was an alcoholic too. And he was a gambler. And I guess that didn't really help things. He calmed down a lot. His life changed in the latter part of my life. But in the beginning, he just didn't thing, and there's these vices. He didn't smoke until he moved to America, so got a lot of bad habits from that too, you know. But yeah, like my household, my mom was a strong woman that kept everything and did everything. If it wasn't for my mom, I wouldn't be here. But she's the tiger mom. She's the most difficult person I ever met, the most negative person I ever met, and things like that. But I know that she loves me and I love her. But it was until later in my life that I understood the love. I didn't understand it being young. I just like always like you being disciplined all the time, you know.
You know, Sonny, I want to mention that in Japan, we don't hug,
Mm.
we don't say I love you.
Yeah, we don't do that either.
And that is so new. Like, I didn't know why people were hugging in America. I
Mhm.
didn't know why my host family, host mom was kissing my host grandma. I had no idea the level of touch and affection and then saying I love you to people. That never happened growing up. So that's why affection and love and then validation is really lacking in Asian communication way. I don't say it's good or bad, it's just a cultural thing. So maybe I don't know many Vietnamese culture. I don't know much about it, but I'm kind of assuming it's kind of similar to Japanese
Mhm.
culture a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's Asian culture. You suppress feelings and things like that because it's not, however, and it's all out of respect and things like that. That's very important in our culture, and family is really thing. But yeah, you're right. There was no I love you or any of that. Now I think back, there is now when we're adults because we it indoctrinated in American society. But that indoctrination also is kind of problematic because my three sisters were born here in this country. None of them graduated college or anything. They had the opportunity, and my family had money by that time. It's just, kind of like things are given to you, and you're not going through like the difficult times and you don't understand and see the differences, maybe, like I know what it is to be dirt poor. My family, my sisters don't really remember, you know what I mean? Because they're kind of been shielded more from it and they're so little that they don't remember by the time, I was in like fifth or sixth grade, we had some money. We're lower middle class. We weren't poor, you know what I mean? But we had something. We had a house and everything too. My mom got her first mortgage at 11% interest rate, saved up a little bit of money. So yeah, but I think also because that maybe they don't have that indoctrination from like America's like, and they're not in that being, I guess it's like, how like warriors are made, they're in the fire. They're doing difficult stuff. They're going through difficult situations, like you're saying, adversity, but they're learning how to be tough. And maybe my
Yeah.
sisters didn't learn how to be tough. Everything's easy. It's like, okay, it's okay. Everything's okay. Well, you know, there's
So
results.
when you talk about, like, I know you mentioned a little bit before that sometimes you don't feel this is not deserving for me, and then you give more to others and stuff. So now, how did this childhood upbringing and adversity affected your adult life in 30s and maybe early 40s right now?
Um, I think it goes back to that same story, which I didn't discover until I was with Tony Robbins. That's like one of the first memories, you know what I mean? Like memories I had. And I was like, what's the pain? And that pain came from that me like getting what I wanted, which was my mom's pocketbook. And now it's taken away because I got what I wanted. All bad things happened. So I thought that was my fault, or I felt like it was my fault. And you don't know as a 3-year old, you know what I mean, how this stuff works. And that's how I discovered it. And it's like, and I think, that came not being worthy. It's like, I don't want anything because if I do get what I want, it'd be bad. So I'll just let everyone else have what they want. But that's also Asian culture, Vietnamese culture, it's family, whatever my mom wants, whatever my sisters want. It's not what I want. And I suppress that. But I think that's common in our culture. And that's something that is a great thing from American society because even this year or even the last few months, I learned that, I should stop suppressing who I am. And for me to be more I am, I got to focus on what is it I really want and go after what I want, not what everyone wants or what everyone thinks that you should do. And even in Asian or Vietnamese society, either you're a pharmacist, you own a nail salon, or you're a doctor or something. That's what your parents want you to do. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the job that you're seeing some of the generations doing, because that's what they feel like, that's respect and all this other stuff, respect your elders. So yeah, I mean, like I guess like that's common, because along like the friends around my age is like everyone's doing what they're being told to do. It's not what they want. They don't know what they want. It's just like it's been so indoctrinated. Hey, you should do this. You need to do this for your family, for everyone. Everyone expects this of you. So,
I completely get it. I was born and raised in Japan, and as a woman, and then as a young, outgoing, very different woman, I suffered with that. For in Japanese, we have a saying "deru kui wo utareru," which means if you are sticky nail, that if there's a sticky nail, you get smacked.
Wow.
So that means you can't be original, you cannot be unique, but you have to behave like everyone else. That's our culture. And I hated it, completely hated it. And even in my 40s, 46, for instance, that women are not really worthy without men kind of mentality. And my PCP was even telling me last year's physical, Juri, you are in America. It's okay to be single mom. You are still worth it. And somebody has to reprogram my brain from this cultural pressure and the biases instilled in me growing up. I would never walk in front of men. Like even if I would go on a date with a black man, like I would never like walk in front of him. And then one time he pushed me. Why are you behind me? And that's just how I was raised. And it just trained in my muscle to be submissive and then behave certain ways. And I'm not saying either or. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It just it limits you.
You know what's wonderful though, Jury, is that you are here in America. Now you get to be who you wanted to be when you were little. You see that change and shift? You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Hey, that might have been the past or the history, but the future is in front of you. You get to be whoever you want. And now look at you, you got this book, you got this show, you were doing the 75th episode. These are amazing things that maybe not been celebrated in past in Japan, but you're here and it can be. And maybe that might be where you can change the culture, even back in Japan. Like, hey, this is how it is here. We're in 2000 now. You know what I mean? We're going to another century. So things need to change. And you can be the one to do the change. And that's what's lovely about it. You get to be you. And that's where you find power, when you're not suppressing yourself. And that's what I've learned from like one of my mentors. His name's Ed Milet. Amazing man. And it's just like, yeah, that's one of the things in society. We got to just be you. Just be you, Juri. People love you. I love you here. This is great. You're like pulling stuff out of me that I haven't talked about in decades. I know that. And I was like, man, I forgot about that. And I forgot about that. I suppressed all those feelings and emotions that didn't come up till now. So you're really good at bringing these things out,
Thank you so much. I appreciate you and respect you. And then I'm really trying to understand the adversity that you went through, as I didn't go through that. But then just learning a lot from you today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Let's move on to the tools part. And before we move on, I just love this part of the podcast because we dissect a lot about adversity. But the reason why I love this format of the podcast so far is I didn't want to make it like just complaining and then victim type of whining type of podcast, but more so like you said, inspire others and then giving them the tools that worked for them. A lot of times people say, oh, just go see a counselor, you'll be fine. It's not like that. It's not overnight fix for seeing counselor. So what did you use? You kind of mentioned a couple things. Maybe your mentor that completely shifted you or worked as a tools to overcome these adversities?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the first thing that anyone should get is definitely a mentor that's been through what you want to go through and has done what you want to do. And I had some of like the best mentors on the planet, to be honest. And I didn't even know what problems I had until they were like, yeah, you need to do this, this. And I was like, oh, because they've been there and they've done that. And I think that's one of the best things I had. Like I mentioned earlier, Tony Robbins, like I had Dean Graciosi, Ed Milet, Orrin Claff. I even had Grant Cardone before, on like sales and Eileen Wilder. It's just like, you know, we stand on what they said, the shoulders of giants. Someone's already been there. We're just on there and just to give us the solutions to get there. And one of the tools that I derive from a lot of the mentors and a lot of the, I spent like $500,000 in coaching and being mentored and things like that. So I spent a lot of money to learn. Basically, it's all emotions. I thought it's all like tactical. You got to do more stuff, but no, it's about emotions. I was like, oh my gosh, can't believe this. And there's a formula I have. You ever had there's white cake in Vietnamese they call it bánh bao. Have you ever had a bánh bao before, Juri?
No.
Okay, so it's a white cake. It's a meat bun. It's usually got pork and an egg in the middle, and it steams. Why do I say that? Because actually about a week ago, I just did a presentation for Vietnamese Business Investment Associations for all my brethren, people in the country, and I actually canceled Tony Robbins' diamond tickets, where like I spent like $15,000 for, because I was like, what do I do? Do I want to help my people that where I was, when I was poor and everything? Or do I want to like, be in front of a bunch of rich people and help them with their stuff? And I was like, you know what? I gave away my tickets to some friends of mine and I went to help my people. And it's so much more enriching. And I had developed like this thing called Bang Bao. So Bao, let me start there. So that's the formula. B plus A equals O. So let's start with B for Bao. So B stands for belief. A stands for action. O equals outcome. And I had an American first, but I had Bang Bao because I'm Vietnamese and all that. American is bag. Belief plus action equals goal, or it could be the bar. A lot of Americans, we like to go drinking. So belief plus action equals results. You see, the word is the same. You can interchange O, R, and G, and then you can have like pictures and stuff. But I like Bang Bao because outcome. So basically on belief is like, have you ever achieved anything in a low state of energy? Juri? And the question and answer to that a lot of times is no. So basically high energy, comes from like high income as well. So that's how it's connected on your belief. And basically when you think about your beliefs, are they positive or are they negative? And what are your thoughts about your beliefs? And then you have to question that. And you're thinking, is it really true what your thoughts are? And you realize there, Juri, that your thoughts are the same thoughts that your parents had, your grandparents, your great-grand. When we were cavemen, we had the same thoughts. It's not like they changed. So they're not really your thoughts, you see? And when you think about that, it's like, that's interesting, isn't it? Right? They're not your thoughts. Other people have those thoughts. You're not the only one that ever thought of this ever, And then we think about those thoughts like, do you think you have the potential to do whatever it is you want to do? And then you think about, how do you feel about these thoughts? And then emotion actually would create other things. Like, how do you feel about it? It's like, is it positive? Is it negative? How do you feel about it? Is that what you want? And then is it a limiting belief? Which means that, hey, this is going to limit you and this will not give you the results that you want. And you think about, how can this thought help you? How can this belief help you? And then you ask yourself, is it empowering belief? Will it give you power? You feel strong from it, And how can this help you? So there is a model for success already. And we talked about mentors. They have a lot of these different models and things. And the thing about belief is, what do they believe? And that's it. What do they believe? Do you believe the same thing? That's a success model. And everything else, it comes from like an identity shift. That's why I learned from Ed Milet. It's like, who do you need to become? That's where belief comes, that it's be live. Who do you want to live? Are you living in a lie today? of the person that you shouldn't be and you don't want to be, or you're feeling negative, and like how you're saying, hey, society back in Japan told you, no, you shouldn't be outgoing, you shouldn't be loud, you shouldn't invent and create new things, you just stay with the masses so no one recognizes you, right? Which is a lie, because it's not you who you are, or you should be living your future self. And you decided to live in your future self, which you are today, a powerful woman. You see that? You're living and you want to be better. So you're going to be more better. Like you tomorrow, just be like 1% better the next day. And that's how you live in the future. Because you know how you're driving a car, you look at a rear view mirror, that's your history and your past. But you look towards your future, that's who you want to be. You strive towards that. That's a goal. And you keep on going. And that's the power of belief. You need to believe in yourself, or sometimes the word encourage means that you're putting encourage in someone else. And that's when you might need someone that loves you, that believes in you. Like my mother believed in me. I believed in her, even though it was tough, negative love. It was like, look, you need to be better. You need to do better. And I was like, okay, because I love you, I will, and that's the belief in Bao. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is A. So now we know beliefs plus action. A is the action. The action is doing, how are you responding to your beliefs to get the results? Is it eeny, weeny, teeny, witty, itty bitty, the results that you want? Or is it massive, ginormous, God-sized dreams where everyone, fits in this dream or this goal that you have? Now that's a belief, that's an action worth doing. You see that? And that goes back to the belief. My actions, like, do you believe it's going to happen? If you don't believe it's going to happen, you're right. If you believe you can do it, you're also right. Ern Nightingale talks about, like, your mind is just a field. It's not agnostic. It's not positive or negative. You can grow corn, which food to eat, or you can grow poison, which kills people. And that person you're killing is you and your mind, So you think about, that's the action. And how you test this, that I have about is the actions are based on belief. Like we said, you test it by your prior results. Think about it and quantify your actions. Were they little? Were they big? And it'll kind of make you think about, it's crystal clear, the outcome that you wanted. Did you really believe you could do it or not? And your action proves it, So it's a choice. And it comes to, do you really want it? And the truth is, the results aren't a lie. The choices are the results or outcome. And do you really want it? One of my other mentors, like Grant Cardone, taught me is that whatever goal you want to achieve, you figured out what action is required for that goal, which is, the bag now, right? So if you know what the action is, you 10x that. So you multiply it by 10, and that's how much the goal is going to be bigger, and what action you need. You 10x that action that you need to do to achieve that goal. So it's 10 times now. So if you hit that goal, if even if you fail and you hit 10% of it, you achieve your initial goal, because there's only one time. So that's just a mindset thing. Like, what action do I need to do? So he believes in massive action. Now you have belief plus action equals your outcome or results. So you think about it, outcome, results, or goal. Juri, you know how to bake a cake, right? You believe that if you had the right recipe, the right amount of eggs, the right amount of flour, sugar, and everything, you make it perfectly, like, Martha Stewart or Betty Crocker. If you had the recipe, you can do it perfect, right? Good. So that's the same thing here. Well, the goal that you want, the outcome, right, is not what you're getting, because the mix of ingredients, which is your actions and your belief, isn't right. That's why it didn't come out. I love brownies. So, I have the recipe from it. I get it from Betty Crocker right from the thing. I make it perfect, and they're amazing. Every time they're the same. McDonald's does the same thing in that. It could be grandma's recipe. I don't have any grandma's recipe for that. My mother-in-law makes great bún bò Huế. So that's like the spicy, noodle soup in Vietnam that they have that's beef. Oh my gosh, it's awesome. I'm trying to get my fiance to do the recipe for it, because that's her mother, on that. But that's a secret on that. So the question is, now you want your outcome or goal is like, what outcome do you want? What do you want? The next question you have to ask is, why do you want it? See, it's never like the money, and people always think it's money. It's like what you can do with the money, Why do you want it? Is it to have a better family, to move to a better life, to have good schools so your children have a better life than you? Everyone wants their children to have better lives than them, And then the next question, how would this make your life better? And this question, a lot of especially Americans don't ask. And in Vietnam, my grandma made that sacrifice because for her 10 children, my mother made it. My mother brought her 10 brothers and sisters, 9 brothers, all from Vietnam, sponsored all of them here. And she was broke most of her life, but she gave them a better life. What do you need to sacrifice to get it? And that's what people forget, the sacrifices. There's always a sacrifice on anything that you want, an outcome. And then the next question you ask is it a must? Right? And then are you interested in it or are you committed? Interest is like dating. So, Juri, you're like, hey, dating. I went speed dating once upon a time. I did 20 dates and thing. It was only 5 minutes. I loved it because I get to see 20 different people, at the same time. But you know what? If you don't like one thing they said, no, I'm not going out you anymore. That's just interested. When you're committed is when you get married till death do us part. So in the outcome or your dreams, are you committed to doing that? So rich people, they say make decisions quickly and change them slowly, while poor people, they make decisions slowly and they change them quickly. And that pretty much sums up the word commitment, you know? And so that's me, but bang bao, belief plus action is outcome. And that's been a big driver for me. I have another one, but I don't, know we have the time and everything, with that. So I know that'll help. That's helped me tremendously.
Thank you so much. And I really commend you for where you are right now, and that you finally realize that you come first, and then your self-love and validation and the belief and action that creates the outcome that is serving you, not other people. And I think that is so important, especially as Asian, like that we put ourselves the last. We don't think about us. We don't. I don't think about myself. I think about
Yeah.
my children, my friends, and I come last. Then, like my physical health, mental health is not stable. Therefore, it affects my children, and I learned that in a hard way. So I'm very happy that I know you had shared so much of your struggle and adversity that you had to face, and I'm sorry for that. And I'm very happy that you had an opportunity to recognize it in your lifetime, and then being able to deal with that, and then being able to shift even in your mind, because like you said, the mindset is the most powerful thing, and I didn't know that. And then the reason why this conversation is very important, precious to me, but this podcast is very like calling to me, is that, like yourself too, that we never ever had this kind of conversation growing up, and had we ever had this kind of resources, real people talking about their struggles, and then real people talking about tools that they used to overcome, I think we we didn't struggle this much. I wouldn't have struggled 3 decades of my life figuring out self-love, self-validation.
Mm.
I was in the podcast earlier. Sex isn't just a pleasure. Sex isn't just the pleasure. I'm like so grateful that I get to be on the guest for different podcasts and given opportunity to speak about child sex abuse and domestic violence. I just modeled for domestic violence awareness fundraiser, Love Life Now Foundation, lovelifenow.org, and I got to be with 5 female and 5 male domestic violence survivor as
Wow.
fashion model runway. And then we never had that. I never ever imagined myself walking with DV victims with such a beautiful clothes and makeup and hair, and getting applauded by so many like attendees. And I was floored with the opportunity and love that I received. So, Sonny, I really appreciate this conversation. You have no idea how our conversation might help threshold and warp somebody's depression, and then can save their lives in a way that we suffered. So,
Yes.
I really appreciate it. And my last question for you is a gift that came from this adversity. So, how would you say a gift that came from this adversity?
A gift, I'm sorry. A
Yes,
gift.
a gift that came from the adversity.
The gift that came from the adversity is that I got to be who I am today because of all the adversity that I went through. And earlier you mentioned about something I definitely want to share, and this is where the gift came from. Like it was with a man named Russell Brunson, which helped me do a lot in marketing. Is that see, I didn't recognize this about 4 years ago. It's like, and here's the thing: in order for me to be able to give more to the world, I have to learn how to receive. I suck at receiving because it's like you said, everybody first, but myself. But because of this, what this one man said, his name is Myron Golden, that said that to me. And he was like, yeah, it just struck me. It hit me even like physiology. I was taking it. I was like, I want to give more to the world, but I don't know how to, I can't give anymore because I'm like almost at empty. I have to learn how to receive to replenish, just like a car. You have to put more gas into it so like that you can drive more. And that's why I paid him $30,000 to learn. And that was the most money ever spent. I didn't have it, but I had to find it because I wanted to learn how to give more to the world. And that was one of the big shifts that shifted me in doing more. And everyone that's going through adversity right now, I will tell you, you learning how to go through it. And once you've gone through it, you can help the next person that goes through whatever adversity you're facing now. And one thing, Juri, that you talked about earlier is like, hey, we never know. Look at take our care of ourselves first. Well, let me tell you this. I learned this from another one of my mentors is that, you know, why they always say the airplane. So I have kids, right? I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. Why you should put the mask on your face first before you put on theirs first, because you only have 7 seconds before you black out. So if you black out and your kids are sitting next to you, you're going to depend on your neighbor to help them and save them. They're not going to be able to save your kids. You know what I mean? They might have their own kids or anything. That's why you need to put the mask on yourself first, Juri, because when you are strong and you can survive, you can save them. And that really hit me hard too. I was like, you're right. And I didn't know why. I always hear it and you're like, you don't know why? Why yourself first? Because if you can't save yourself, you can't save the other people that you love. And that's one thing I can tell you that really stuck with you is like, yes, you have children as well. You know, I saw your son there. You got to save yourself and do everything for you so you can do more for them and everyone that's in this podcast and the future guests that you have and your audience and all these other people in the book and all these lives you're going to touch. That's why you got to be around longer to help others. So, yes.
Well, thank you, Sonny. I have a request for you. Two requests. One, give an advice for somebody who just came from Vietnamese and Vietnam, and then Vietnamese community, and then people that maybe going through what you went through. What's your biggest advice that you can give to them that if they were struggling still?
Make friends. Make friends with people that have done what you have, that with their struggle, and just ask for help. See, the funny thing with asking for help is, and even Vietnamese people or a lot of Asians, we don't ask for help. That's not in our culture. We're trying to do it and tough everything out yourself. That's why it becomes harder. You know, if you ask for help, other people help you because they have been there. And if that person, there's another person to help you. And there's another person. And because they're helping you, that makes them feel good. Don't think you're taking away from them. They're giving to you too, because that's how they were helped. Like me, I would help many, many different people in the struggles. Why? Because I've been there. People help me, and that's how I'm paying it forward. That's the principle that I learned. Ask for help. Someone will definitely help you. You ask enough. Don't ask one person to say no and think like you're not worth it. No, there's always someone to help you because they have been where you've been through. Someone's helped them, and it's an obligation to help you. And that's just humankind, you know?
And then will you say some message in Vietnamese?
Oh gosh. You know, people speak broken English to Vietnamese. Well, I speak broken Vietnamese. So you know, anh chị em đây ni có người Việt ở ngoài đấy á, tại anh chị em biết nói tiếng Việt Nam á, mà mình biết nói tiếng Anh á, tại mình biết nói tiếng Anh á, mình giúp được mấy người Việt Nam. And em ở đây em giúp được anh chị hai em á, ni mình có chuyện gì mà giống như vậy mà em hay anh thì giúp được á thì em giúp. So I basically said that I'll help you. because I speak Vietnamese, I'm Vietnam, and because I speak English, I have an obligation to help you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Sonny, for coming to A Gift from Adversity, episode 75. And I really appreciate your time and sharing your story tonight.
I love being here, and thank you so much, Juri, to have me share with your audience so we can help people. I love it. I love your movement.
Great. And thank you again for our listeners. And then I will try to create more episodes. And I really appreciate it. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you again, everyone.